Success in general, not just business, is sometimes quite polarizing in the sense that you can see the result, you can see the gold medal, you can see the reward, you can see the awards that you've won, etc. But what you don't see sometimes is the path and the stepping stones that got you from A to B. It may just look like a snap your fingers overnight success, but it very rarely is the case. In today's podcast, I'm speaking with a gentleman who has grown his business from 2 staff to 300 staff in the space of 9 years. Now, again, this is a polarizing image because you look at the business now and you think, wow, in 9 years, he's grown into this huge organization. But what we do in this podcast is break down some of the stepping stones, some of the fundamental blocks that helped him get from where he was to where he is today. For any of you guys that are out there that are thinking, I am my business, it will never grow because of X, Y, Z. There's no right people out there. We don't have processes and all this kind of stuff. This is the podcast that you need to tune into because, as you will learn, it is very achievable, but you just need to have the right things in play. So I hope you enjoy this podcast. It's from a lovely gentleman out of the United States who has just achieved amazing results. It is a beautiful story, I suppose, of the journey of business. And I know you're going to get a lot out of it. I certainly loved conducting this interview. It was fantastic. And I know you guys are going to enjoy it. There's a couple of resources that are going to be available through the show notes. Make sure you head across there and get them because they will be very valuable. And also, if you have any comments or if you wanted to ask any further questions, you can do that in the Facebook community or wherever you see this come through in your social channels. You can post comments there and I will endeavor to get them answered for you as soon as humanly possible. Anyway, enjoy the show. I know you're going to love it. If you do like it, please leave us a review over at Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, blah, 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 wherever else you listen to your podcast or watch them, I should say, as well. Obviously, this is a video podcast now as well, so you can tune in at YouTube and on Facebook. Otherwise, guys, enjoy, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Bye-bye. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradie Web Guys. Tradie Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations and it's fantastic. Head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
John Akhoian, welcome to the Site Shed podcast.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Matt.
So, mate, all the way from the US, whereabouts are you based?
I'm based out of Los Angeles, California.
Oh, lovely. And how's it going over there?
It's going pretty good. We're having a mild summer, so it's not as hot as it usually is, and it feels good to go out.
And the Dodgers are looking like favorites to make the playoffs, so you must be happy about that.
Yeah, we have quite a few good teams out here, so Dodgers being one of them.
Yeah, lovely. So, mate, we're talking today a bit about your story. You've run a successful plumbing company over there, and as much as we love to talk about the successes of guests on the show, we also like to talk about, I suppose, the journey. So obviously, to make it relatable to a lot of the viewers and the listeners out there, we really like to talk about some of the obstacles that you've overcome on the route to getting to where you now are. For the listeners out there, you can also tune in and you can watch this recording over at YouTube or via the Facebook page. That's the facebook.com/the Site Shed, and it will also be reposted in the group. If you're not in the group, jump in the group because a lot of the conversations happen within there. So, yeah, John, I'm really excited to have this conversation because even from our little chat just offline before, it's pretty clear that you and I have some pretty similar values in the space of dispelling myths around the trades and educating the masses about what an amazing option it is to go into a trade. It can open so many windows of opportunities. I know if somebody had told me 15 years ago that today I'd be sitting here as a podcaster, I probably wouldn't have believed them while I was an apprentice, but it certainly can open a lot of amazing windows and doors through doing a trade. So my message has always been where you start is not where you will end up. And I dare say from the brief conversation that we've already had, you're of a pretty similar mindset.
Yes, absolutely.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up in the plumbing trade, and I suppose where the foundations all began?
Yeah, I got into the trades when I was 17 years old, and I kind of happened to fall into the trades like some people do. I have a saying: you either your dad's a plumber and you want to be like your dad, or you fall into plumbing through hardship or having no other choice. And mine came from falling into plumbing because I had no other choice.
Oh, yep.
My dad passed away when I was 17, and I wasn't all that great in school. So plumbing was one of the options in front of me, and I took it, and I completely fell in love with it. So
Isn't it that's a very similar story. I mean, thankfully I still have my father, but I know the education system here in Australia is very geared towards inverted commas academia, and sadly, it's very often the story where people think, well, I can't get into my accounting course in university or college, so I need to go and do a trade. Over the years, I've learnt that is very much a myth, and certainly some of the smartest business owners and operators that I've met around the planet, it's probably slightly biased because I run a podcast for tradespeople, but certainly some of the smartest operators I've ever met, around the world are trade business owners. You can make a significant living and lifestyle out of doing a trade. So I encourage anyone out there listening to this that is maybe not what they would consider academic, or what I suppose the education system considers academic, to certainly think of trades as a valid option, alternative, not necessarily a fallback. But I was very much like yourself, John. I wasn't academic at school, and I went and did plumbing. I was going to join the military actually, and then I got offered an apprenticeship, so I decided to take the apprenticeship, and it was the best thing I did.
yeah, that's the best thing I did too. And plumbing's always been Plan B for my family as well, because
Right.
it was. And now I look at it, I go, why was it Plan B?
Right.
Because I did better than most of my friends that went to college and university. So
One of the things I'm really interested to talk to you about, John, is basically on that, because we're talking about a lot of people when they go through the education path, they do get access to, I suppose, a lot of networks, a lot of teaching around being financially smart. And I know myself, when I went through an apprenticeship, that didn't exist, and we didn't really have any mentors or any coaches or any bosses that were wanting to invest in us in order to make sure that as an apprentice, when you're making money while your friends are at college and university, you are doing the right things with it. And as a result, where I should have been in a position when I finished the apprenticeship where I should have been well ahead of my friends, I was probably in a position where I was financially illiterate, and I ended up in a worse position, which since then has sort of recouped. But I think there's a bit of a gap there. And I know that you invest heavily within your staff to make sure that they are doing the right things with their money. And I think that's fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to diving into that a little bit down the track. But so did you serve an apprenticeship in Los Angeles?
So when I got into plumbing, I dropped out of high school after my dad died, and I just went to work for a family friend, sort of like an uncle to me. And he was a plumber, and I started out, working with him in my apprenticeship as his helper.
Right.
Sort of, the guy that digs ditches and
Yep.
goes and gets the fittings and the tools when you're under the house.
Great. And so was he kind of like a bit of a mentor to you at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. It taught me everything I know about plumbing, and then continued to learn more after I started my business.
And so I know you went through the franchise path at one point, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I purchased a franchise and went through that path.
So can you talk to us a little bit about, we've had many guests on the show that have been working within franchises, businesses, and have since adopted the franchise mindset and implemented that into business, largely, I think, because of the fantastic structure that they teach you within a franchise business model. Sounds certainly like that's something that you've done very well in your business. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your segue into owning a franchise and then taking what you'd learned from that and implementing it into your own organization once you started that up.
Yeah, great. So, when I started my plumbing company, I was an individual operator, had my own truck, and was really successful in making money through commercial plumbing and also new construction and other things. So, when I was right around 4 years into owning my company, I started looking for investing into a franchise, and I found a plumbing franchise that I invested in, and it was great because I learned a lot about the finances of the business. Even though I knew the plumbing aspect, what I learned mainly from the franchise was the financial aspect. I really never knew how to read a balance sheet or a financial statement. I always looked at my bank account, and if it was growing, I'd go, "Hey, I'm doing good," right? That was my financial statement. So early on, it really taught me how to look at numbers, how to read numbers, and it was really good. I learned and I grew fast in the franchise, won a lot of awards, franchise of the year, sales leader of the year for multiple years back to back. And eventually I got out of it because it became, what helped me get there was also holding me back from what my goal was reaching out even further. So it got to a point where, I eventually sold the franchises. I got out of the franchise so I could start Rooter Hero, and I'm glad that I did because now I have an opportunity to continue to grow even further.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about some of the fundamental, I suppose, areas of business which you learned while you're in that franchise model and what you've been able to take from that and deploy into your own company and probably, I would say, significantly improve, which is normally the case when you go from working in an organization to working in your own. You learn as much about the things that you shouldn't be doing as much as the things that you should be doing. So I'm keen to hear what some of the standout areas for you were. You just mentioned finance, which is absolutely paramount, and I agree with you completely. Like it's such an important part of business that very often if we're not taught it, and when I don't know about in the United States, but I know that in Australia certainly there's no part of your curriculum when you're going through your apprenticeship where they teach you anything about balance sheets, profit and loss statements, or anything like that. So it's kind of over here, it's a situation where when you finish your apprenticeship, sort of like, well, here's the ticket to your here's your license, your plumbing license. You can go and trade, but we're not going to teach you anyway on how you can be successful at it. What are some of the other areas there apart from finance? I mean, I'm guessing a lot of this stuff may even be somewhat subconscious to you now. Like you sort of grew up with it going through a franchise model, but I mean, things like systems and operating procedures and recruiting and hiring staff and putting team members in place, all that kind of stuff, which you probably do as a second nature. I imagine a lot of the listeners and viewers out there would be very interested in hear some of the process around that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons in joining a franchise, and definitely some of the pros are, learning more about how to work on the business than in the business. I was really good at working in the business and learned a lot about financing, how to read financial statements. There's also the networking that you find within franchising groups that I found very helpful in my beginning years. Having those relationships where you can actually call somebody that's doing the same thing, maybe in a different territory or something, and go visit them and compare your best practices with theirs. I found that always to be very helpful. So those were some of the early things that I really found helpful. I was always a hard worker. I always really like to excel. I love to build and see that happen. So being in a networking group like that really helped because I was able to look at my numbers, compare it, and go, hey, you know what? If so and so could do that, I could do that, right? So able to go work on my business and then get it to a point to do that.
So one of the things that I did want to talk to you about is culture, business culture. And I know you've got some really good strategies in place in relation to staff and, family and that kind of thing. I think it also stems back to your, what you've just mentioned there. You've got quite a strong belief in educating. As a result, I suppose you've written a number of books. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the books that you've read in the lead up to where I'm heading with this culture conversation?
Oh yeah, I mean, Up until I graduated, or not graduated, or dropped out of high school, I don't think I read a single book. But after I got into plumbing, I probably read, I would say hundreds of
Yeah.
books and listened to even more audiobooks. So I always used my van as
Yeah.
a university. Every
Mm.
time I was driving the calls, I'd listen to some good audiobooks, financing books, anything I could get my hands on. And it led me to write 3 books for the trades. The first book I wrote was for the trades. But I think your question was, what are some of the books that I read that I found helpful, right? Was that what you wanted?
Uh, well, no, we can definitely talk about that. I was actually wanting to hear a bit about your books first, but then we can talk about some of the influential books that you've read and listened to in the past as well. Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. The first book I wrote is called "The Secret to Real Wealth," and the subtitle is "How a Career in Plumbing Could Help You Retire Wealthy."
Yeah.
And the book is short stories about myself and other people in our company that actually created wealth by getting into the trades. And how getting into the trades is, for me, it was Plan B. I've always grown up in a family where my dad and my mom wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, and I was always Plan A, right? But I got into plumbing, and that was Plan B. And how plumbing actually, or the trades, can actually be Plan A. They don't have to be Plan B. And what are the benefits? So we have a training program at called Hero University, and it just talks a little bit about that as well and how we put it together. And it talks about how to, retire wealthy, getting into the trades. My second book is called Creating 99 Millionaires. And it's everything we teach to our employees in our company. We have something called a PEP training that we do multiple times a year. And PEP stands for Partner Enhancement Program. We call everybody that works in our companies partners because they truly are partners. Everybody comes in and has the opportunity to create real wealth through working in our organization. And it talks about 3 concepts. It talks about, first of all, the people that have worked with me in our company and have become millionaires in the process. And then it talks about what we teach, which is, how to make more money in the trades, how to live below your means, and number 3, how to invest. And we do that training multiple times a year where we get our staff financially, we give them financial training on how to kind of apply all of those skills within their household and how to create household budgets and how to use that to become wealthy.
And just out of curiosity, how did you learn that yourself?
Well, it's funny you ask. I learned that as a plumber, I've never really had a problem making money.
Mm.
And I would say the biggest influence I had on me and those skills and those habits came from my wife. She works in the business with me, and her dad taught her a lot about budgeting and financing. And when we met, I was very young. I was about 21 years old and was making a lot of money in plumbing, and I was spending it faster than I was making it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met my wife, she said that, let me teach you a few skills about how to, save up and have some money for investing and other things. And she helped me open up my first savings account, and I started putting money in there, and then we created budgets together. We finally went on to get married, and I'm a very happy man, been happily married for over 20 years.
Nice.
And she's really helped me learn about money. So early days came from my wife.
Fantastic. I mean, it's such a, I think for a lot of the listeners out there and for people out there, everywhere, it is very often sometimes like a chance. It's not. It does take a random introduction to people, or you might meet somebody somewhere who can help you, mentor and educate you, and those sort of things. Because it's not, as I said before, it's not the kind of thing that people that you really get taught while you're going through, university or college studying a trade or whatever it is. So unless you've actually got somebody who's willing to throw their hand up and walk you through those those stages. I think it's extremely, it's not commonplace for people to understand how to do those sort of things, which is why I'm going to recommend to everyone to go and read those books, because if there's a roadmap there and a blueprint, then I think that's an invaluable learning curve for anybody, not just starting out a business, just anybody who's trying to adult correctly.
Absolutely.
And then there's another book that I believe you're just about to publish, right?
Yeah, I have a new book coming out called Values First, and it talks about the values of our organization and how we apply the values in our relationship building process with our customers. And that book, just kind of has stories of all of our people that have demonstrated the values through service, and how the culture of the organization, in the root, fundamental foundation is built on these values, and how we live them. What do we do to apply them? What do we do to make sure that we put them into our personal lives and our professional lives?
So you just touched on something that I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into, the Hero University. Is that an internal staff program, or is that something that's available to the masses?
It's a internal training program that we've created for our company.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a training program that we've had dozens and dozens, probably I'd say maybe 50, 70, almost 100 people that have gone through it already. And it's a 12-week course that has to do with hands-on training in the field for 2 days a week. And it has 3 days a week of classroom and mock-up training. And over the course of a quarter, we teach somebody brand new coming in from the outside that doesn't know anything about the plumbing trade, to going into homes and being able to do replacements of disposals, drain cleaning, anything to do with residential plumbing.
And so is that something, how did that come about? Was that a way for you to, I suppose, build a consistent delivery of the way that you things want it done within your company, the way that you can sort of systemize that to a degree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes from building our staff in the field, because we're getting busier and busier, and we found that it's getting harder and harder to find plumbers out there because there's not enough people in the trades. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the main reasons why I wrote my first book. And we find it that when we teach people the trades, that and they come in learning nothing about it before, we could teach them how we do it, and we could teach them how our company does the relationship building process, and a lot of times that goes a lot better than hiring somebody that's been doing it their way for so many years.
Yes, isn't that interesting? So I've had so many guests on the show that say the same thing. Sometimes the hardest thing about hiring somebody with a lot of experience is trying to teach them to unlearn what things they've done and relearn the way that you want things done. I suppose one of the key topics that a lot of the guests and people that we have on the show, and conversations within the community, constantly comes up over and over again all around the world, is in relation to staff, recruitment, finding the right staff, training, retaining, so on and so forth. It's certainly not specific to any individual market, because it doesn't matter who I talk to around the world, they all seem to have issues. The biggest issue they have is around finding people to work for them or work with them. And it sounds to me like you have a very unique approach to, I suppose, to the recruitment process, which ties in very closely to what our Levy has taught us in the past on the show here, where if you can offer your staff, or not people that are not yet staff, so people maybe in the prospecting stage, a career path as opposed to a job, that differentiates you between somebody who's offering them an extra $3-4 an hour because they can see where they're going to be heading down the journey of being part of your organization. I like how you refer to your team as partners, because that's certainly, I think, sort of clarifies that mindset. And I believe that is a really important part of, I suppose communicating to potential staff members and staff members, their role and then where they fit into the whole piece of the puzzle. Has that always been a firm belief for you? Is it more about, I suppose, empowering them to take ownership as opposed to giving them a job?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people that come into our organization, we do empower them to make more money. There is a career path for them to continue to earn more and more. And it's always been figuring out how to open doors for people to be able to create a career within our company or into the trades period. We definitely find that we get more loyalty from the people that we train from the ground up.
Yep.
And that they stick around longer, and they work and elevate within the organization from just being an apprentice to being a plumber to being a master plumber, and then to eventually going into either a management role or some kind of sales role, and they're able to continuously earn more and more money as they advance.
So when we've had many conversations in the community, and even recently on the Surf and Learn program I just ran in the Maldives, we put a huge emphasis there on helping the attendees understand the importance of having organizational structure. Our levy's huge on it. He's basically built an entire business model around it. And once you've got the organizational structure, then working in towards, operating procedures, training manuals, so on and so forth, relevant to the different departments and, that kind of thing. I'm just curious for your business. Obviously, we've never spoken before, but I'm wondering, do you have that sort of organizational structure in place where people can come in here and they can see where they may end up within the company over a certain given period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have that displayed in an org chart that shows, which level people come in at and how they can continue to grow. And I mean, we've even have right now some of our staff members that came in as plumbers or apprentices and moved into operational roles where they're actually running their own center. Some of them that moved into sales roles where they're making, north of $500,000 a year, in annual take home. So yeah, they could definitely see that, and we're not shy about talking about that either. So we continuously like to discuss on how people do move up.
I think it's such a defining mindset shift between companies that are on a clear growth path to companies that are maybe starting out and a little bit unsure about the right things to implement from the beginning. I imagine that when you started in a franchise model, a lot of that stuff was taught to you. But for the listeners out there that are unfamiliar with it, definitely start investing in that space, because once you can understand how that model and that business structure looks, it just makes growth so much more achievable, I suppose, because you can see it like it's there in front of you. John, with how big is the team currently? Or if I'm permitted to ask that question.
Yeah, absolutely. We have right now we have currently about 250 trucks on the road. We staff north of 300 people.
Wow.
In the entire organization. We operate in 2 states, in Arizona and primarily California. We have 11 offices altogether, 11 different major metropolitan offices that we service, and we're growing.
Wow, that's crazy. So 300 staff. So I imagine, where did it all start for you? Was it in downtown LA?
Yeah, we started Rooter Hero in Orange County. We started with 1 truck in Orange County in 2011, and we've had rapid growth. It's been a really good 8 or 9 years now. So it's been a fun ride.
So it went so in 8 or 9 years, it's gone from 1 truck to 300 staff.
300 staff, yes.
That's incredible. So let's talk a little bit about that journey, because obviously that's significant growth. And, we all know that with growth comes a lot of successes, but then a lot of problems as well. Pretty much everything magnifies, as Alan Ferguson says, for better or worse, when you start growing. So I'm curious to see what some of the the key obstacles and some of the key winnings were for you in relation to growth?
Well, I mean, some of the obstacles were, like with any fast-growing operation, sometimes you outgrow your processes, and there's people wearing a lot of hats, and everybody's all hands on deck most of the time. So there's been a lot of adjusting, and then having to look at the org chart and go, okay, how do we best service the customer? What positions do we need to add now? And what are some of the current challenges? But occasionally looking at that and then getting the right people on the bus is always a challenge, even at this stage. But some of the key things, when we started the business, a friend of mine who actually was one of the founding partners, Mike West, he's a 3-generation plumber. So it's really helped having one of the founders of the company that goes back 3 generations, because our story goes back quite a few years, even though the company's rather young. So that's been really positive when it comes to the marketing aspect. But we've put a lot of money into reinvesting into our brand. That's been one of the key growths, is putting a lot of money into marketing and brand recognition, and just making sure that we're aggressive in opening up territories. There was a year where we opened up 4 locations in 1 year. It might not be too much for some some bigger companies, but for us, that was a lot of traveling. Absolutely. A lot of time on the road, time away from the family. Those are some of the key things that we did.
So when you've got multiple locations, did you say you had 11 now? Is that what you said?
We have 11 major markets that we service. Yes.
And so does that mean that each location has its own office or warehouse set up?
Some locations still share one office, but for the most part, yeah, each office has its own warehouse. And the way we're designed is there's an operations manager. Yep. In some locations, we have them that buy equity shares that own their own location. And there's a person operating the business. And with that, there's in our bigger locations, we have about 25 plumbers operating, with some install staff and maybe 3 or 4 salespeople. Mm-hmm. We have some office staff as well, but for the most part, we have a headquarters in Mission Hills, where our call center is at, where we do payroll, accounting, human resources, marketing. Mm-hmm. And our goal at the headquarters is to provide all the resources all of our centers need, so they could continue to grow. Okay. So they could continue to be able to service the customers.
So it's one call center takes the calls for the entire organization and dispatches them accordingly?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was always curious as to how that might look when you've got such a broad geographical area to cover, how you might handle that. So the calls come in, even for the Arizona side of the business, they still come in through the California office?
Yeah, we're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As you know, like emergency plumbing companies don't sleep. So we have a on-call. We have somebody in the office every day, 24 hours a day, and they're answering the phones, dispatching it. And we do it for Arizona and all the locations.
When growing so rapidly in such a short period of time, what are some of the fundamental, when we're talking about putting people in positions? I mean, obviously, when you started out, it was you, and how many partners did you say there were?
There was one founding partner, yeah, and he's sort of retired now. He's out doing a mission for his church. Okay. So it was just one partner.
So when you got started, there was basically the 2 of you, right?
Yes.
And then what was the first step in saying, okay, well, if we're going to grow this from A to B, this is what we need to do? Like, how did that strategy look? Like, what was the focus? Was it on marketing? I mean, obviously, delivery of product is paramount, but I mean, what did that conversation look like before you got started?
So it was as fast as we can find the talent that we needed, mm-hmm, to be able to run our centers. So the key focus was looking for talent, was looking for those rainmakers, those operators, And in some cases, we would, look at somebody. We had really successful operations managers who's also an equity owner in one of our divisions, where he had his own plumbing company. He tried to do it alone. It was very difficult because he was wearing all hats. And as soon as he went into one of our operating centers and we took all of the burdens of the back end office, paperwork, answering the phones, everything, and provided them the resources of putting plumbers in front of him so he could interview, hire, and then ordered the vans and got them all the equipment they needed. He just grew rapidly. I mean, we grew that organization from, zero to $10 million really fast because, he was right in his sweet spot. He was in his strong suit, for doing what he wants to do. And he's really happy doing it. So for us, the major growth was finding those right operators. As soon as we found the right operators, it didn't matter where we opened it because we knew we would be successful. I mean, we went to some of the territories that people thought would be really, bad to operate and made it really, really successful by putting the right person in place.
And so how does that recruitment process look for you guys? Like when you're searching for somebody for a certain position or whatever, how does your process differentiate between, I suppose, other organizations out there?
So, after a while, it got to a point where we needed help. So now we have a full-time recruiter that also has some help in placing ads, and our marketing department also helps out with the recruitment department. But we have somebody full-time that's just looking for those people. So we started using some profiling. We use something called Culture Index, which tells us where people's dots are. We use something called Kobe. But for the most part, we get on a conversation and we just talk about what experience they have. So if somebody's run a plumbing company before and they've hit a glass ceiling because they got into a level of complication, and we know that we could complement that by, having our back end office or other people handle the areas that they're not good in, and we just put them into their unique ability where they're actually really good at and have them focus on those few things. We just see things grow.
Yeah, it's so often the case, isn't it, where you like we put people in positions where they're not best suited. And I mean, what you spoke about there with personality profiling and all that kind of stuff. It to the listeners and the viewers out there, it might sound like such a macro thing to implement into a small business, but the reality is it's so applicable at all levels. And if you're putting somebody who's highly analytical into a sales role or something, then you might find that they don't convert very well. They might be great at the accounting side of things. So I think that really is important. There's a lot of it's available free. I've done podcasts on them as well. Like we did an entire episode on, I think I called it "Why I Annoy People So Much," because after doing a personality profile, I finally realized where my strengths and weaknesses were and why some people I could relate to and some people I couldn't. So I think that's really, really important for everyone out there at a base level. When you're hiring, put people through some sort of profiling test where you can really, I suppose, put them in the right position. At the end of the day, it comes down to, like you just said before, equipping them and putting them in positions where they're going to perform the best, because realistically, we can't all be good at everything.
Yep, exactly. And it's, about 80% accurate. So right. We found that, there's definitely some inaccuracy when it comes to that, but I take 80% over a 50-50. But once we get on the phone and we talk to them as well, we're able to feel more comfortable. So our main growth has been finding the talent, because that's the number one challenge that we've had. But now we have talent coming to us, and it's been a lot easier to grow because people want to be in an environment where they have the networking relationships, and there's others that are doing really well, and we have a very collaborative work environment where we have open door and people could go in and learn from each other and do ride-alongs. Management could go hang out at another manager's office for a week, learn the best practices and come back and implement.
And so when you're hiring somebody into the organization, is the first step putting them through the Hero University, where they go through and those first 12 weeks?
Yeah, we do put, if they're coming in as a non-experienced apprentice, we put them through the 12-week Hero University. If we do hire more seasoned staff that, like plumbers that already know what they're doing, we put them through a 2-day communication training, which is called TNT and boot camp, and it just talks about our whole relationship building process. How we drive to the home, to how we knock on the door, to the questions we ask homeowners, and kind of how to set up the work area and all of that stuff. For management, we have them go through a 1-week training where they come to headquarters, they sit in the call center, they'll sit in accounting, they'll go through HR, and they'll kind of go through all of the departments and kind of understand how the back end works. So they meet all the people on the back end. And then we also have them go out and visit one of our centers and sit with another manager and spend a few days understanding how they do things and how they run centers.
I love this because it's so often, I've been guilty of it myself. I'm sure all the listeners and viewers out there, anyone that's hired staff, they've probably learned the hard way to a degree, in the sense of you bring someone on board and you just say, this is your job, go and do it. And very often we neglect to onboard them correctly and equip them correctly with the right processes around, how to deliver their job the right way or the way that we expect it. We just sometimes I know in the past, I can't remember where I read this, and I'm paraphrasing and I'm probably going to screw it up, but it's something along the lines of, 99% of the problems to do with your staff come from you as the business owner, because you haven't hired them the right way, you haven't recruited correctly, you haven't onboarded, you haven't trained them, and as a result, you can't retain them. So that sounds like a fantastic culture that you built there, in the sense of, well, look, we want to hire you, we want to train you, we want to help you to perform the best that you possibly can. Once you've gone through that process, what does that look like once they're already staffed, they're already onboarded, they're part of the team, they've been through their 12 weeks, their 1 week training, whatever it is there some sort of, do you hold their hand through a certain period to help them, further? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, when, for example, for a person that's running a location, we have continuous meetings, we have continuous financial meetings where, we'll meet with them once a month, we'll go through the financial statement. Our chief operating officer has one-to-ones, we call it, where with every manager that's running the operations, that he's having a one-to-one meeting. Spends about an hour to 2 hours a week with each manager. Wow. Just talking about their location, how it's going, what are some of the things they're working on, goes and looks at the annual commitments, talks about issues, opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, kind of goes over everything and puts down a plan and just makes sure that they're on track with their plan. Salespeople, we have a weekly phone call we do with all of our sales staff where we share best practices. We bring in some guest speakers, other people that come in that motivate them. They talk about, the process of, how we do our options, because we leave customers with options. Mm-hmm. We have a weekly book club where it's open door for everybody. We have a lot of staff that comes in and we read a book and we talk about, and they're all self-help books. So we're talking about, we might read a book that'll, pertain nothing about a plumbing company. It's all about, how to become better. And mm-hmm. So we do that. And then we have the 2-day monthly training where we bring anybody that we feel needs to go back to the basics and learn the fundamental, hero delivery style. And we bring them in and they go through a 2-day training. And every year we make sure every staff goes through it at least once a year as a refresher. So we'll hold a big class. Last year we did it in Pasadena and we trained about 150, 200 people in 4 days. Wow. And we had people come in groups and big auditorium style and had a good time training, broke bread, had lunch, dinners together, and everybody went off. And just making sure that our delivery system is consistent, so the homeowner gets delivery that we're expecting them to get, the good service.
So in terms of things like performance indicators and all that kind of stuff, when you're bringing somebody on board as a staff member in a certain position, are you presenting them with a series of deliverables which might lead to certain indicators and that kind of stuff to make sure they're doing their position correctly?
Oh yeah, we share key performance indicators quite rapidly. Actually, we have we what we do here is we do open book management.
Okay.
So once a month, every single staff member will go into a all hands-on meeting, and it usually lasts about an hour and a half. We video conference it because we're so spread out,
Mm-hmm.
and we open up and share our financial statements with every single person in the company. We talk about what some of the challenges are, what's going on that's good, and then we also go through each key performance indicator for each division, for each position,
Mm.
and we share it with everybody. We take the top 10, we celebrate, we clap, give out awards, and then we share it on a weekly basis as well. We have big monitors and dry erase boards in every office, so we always consistently update the numbers. We show them the company-wide numbers, some of the top talent in the company, what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and connect it to what they're doing so they could see that if they were to apply the same things, they could actually achieve the same results.
So it's kind of gamifying to a degree, but it's also putting things in perspective, I suppose, across different departments. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. It's gamifying. And we do, we share awards. We give out game tickets, Lakers, you mentioned Dodgers earlier, and all the sports teams we have around here.
Yeah.
And we also do annual vacations. We've taken multiple people to Cabo San Lucas every year. Last year we had I think it was about 60 people that went, and it was just,
Wow.
yeah, it was just amazing, getting to spend 4 days, and everybody that made the trip gets to network with one another. So it's just a fun environment. I mean, we have a holiday party every year where we give out hundreds of awards.
Yep.
We have our own company rings with, we call it the Champions Club. So it's just a lot of celebration, a lot of recognition, and just a lot of fun.
I suppose with like in how did you get to that? I mean, that's something that I suppose obviously you constantly need to be working on. Who's in charge of these? Is there an HR manager or something who comes up with these awesome incentives? Like where did this stuff come from?
Well, it's just all stuff that we put in place and we track, and yeah, there's various people in charge of various things. Like we have incentives for people, that get reviews, because reviews are big.
Right.
And our marketing manager is who runs that. He keeps track of everyone's reviews. We go through a company called Podium. So we keep track of who's sending review invites. And every month when we're having our all team meeting, he'll put up a board and he'll start reading some of the reviews, and he'll talk about the technicians that got the most reviews.
Okay.
We'll clap and celebrate. So he's in charge of that, and I'm in charge of the big stuff like the vacation. I have an assistant, executive assistant, that helps me with that. She updates the numbers every week, and then our what do you call it? Our accounting manager actually starts saving the money for the vacation. Some of the bigger events, we start putting the money in early so we don't have to expense the location all at once. So
Right.
we'll already know who's about to hit it and who's about to go, and we'll start planning early.
So this ties back to the budgeting that your wife taught you.
Yes, exactly. And she works in the business as well. So
Okay.
it's been actually a key factor in our growth, because I don't think I could have done half the things that I've done without her support.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's sort of making those, like having perspective, and this is something that I've certainly learned through a lot of the amazing people that we get to speak to on the show, is having a clearly defined map of, where the business is going to be in 12 months, which could include things like events that are coming up, so on and so forth, and then being able to trace that back in bite-sized chunks. So, we need to put this much money in every week, every month in order to be able to pay for this event that's coming up, that kind of thing. Like even that alone, I think is extremely powerful, regardless of obviously the main things would be, marketing, and there would be sales targets and that kind of stuff, but then breaking it down even to incentives and awards and events and things like that, all ties together when you have like a destination and you can create a journey towards it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just have a lot of good people. I mean, there's just so many great people on the back end that do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to tracking these numbers, putting them together. And I've just been really blessed with a really good team.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's great going to work because I get to go work with the kind of people I want to be with,
And so, John, is your role in the business today, obviously as a CEO, is there a general manager in position that reports to you, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I have a chief operating officer that reports to me. I have the executive assistant, and even though we have a manager in each location, I make it a point to try to go to every location, meet the people. I go do ride-alongs probably every quarter. I go out in the field and spend 2-3 days, sometimes a week,
Wow.
riding along with technicians, salespeople, understanding the process, and then coming back and then going, how can we make this better? I learn a lot. I get to, share time with people that are out there on the front lines. They appreciate it. I learn a lot and I hear them, and then I come back and, that's how we get our initiatives. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? It's with me going out in the field and living the day of a plumber, because sometimes, I've been out of the field for so long, sometimes you forget.
Yeah.
And that's something that I continuously do.
I think that's really important. And, we talk a lot about processes and, empowering your team and that kind of stuff. And I think for business owners or managers, it's sometimes a hard pill to swallow to appreciate that the people that are out in the field, or the people that are, taking the calls, or the people that are, reconciling your accounts or whatever, are going to have better experience at doing something than you are. And so being able to create, like you said, that open book kind of management style where, you want to work with them and collaborate with them in order to improve process. From what I can gather in the larger organizations and from people that I've spoken to, similar to yourselves, it does a couple of things. First of all, if they know that you're spending time with them because you value their professional opinion on something, it makes it makes them feel a lot more valuable in the organization. And then once you come back to them with a process which they've effectively built off what you've learnt from them, they're far more willing and far more, I suppose, likely to follow that process, or teach people how to follow that process. Well, John, this has been absolutely brilliant. As I suspected before we had the conversation, I haven't even looked at one of the questions that I was going to ask you during this call, but I think that we've covered off some pretty important stuff here. Is there anything else that you'd like to dive into? I mean, we could probably talk for hours and hours on this. I imagine there's literally months of conversations we could have here, but is there anything that you think you'd like to add, being courteous to your time, of course?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, just, I love the plumbing industry. I love the trades. And, the thing I encourage people to do is get into something they love doing and continue to do it and get better and better at it, because the better you get, the less problems you end up having, and the more you're able to accomplish. So that's something that we encourage everybody at Rooter Hero to do. And that's something that I encourage everyone to do. Just work on yourself, because the better you get, the better life you'll have.
Yeah, absolutely. So for any of the viewers, listeners out there, guys, if you want to get access to John's books, I believe that are they free through the website, John, as well? Is that what you said?
Yeah, we have an ebook that we'll send anybody that goes into our website, and the books are also on Amazon, and we'll have a link on our website to order an actual book if you wanted to.
Perfect.
But we'd be happy to send you a free ebook if you wanted to inquire about any of the books that I wrote.
So guys, I'm going to have links to all that stuff on the show notes. So if you want to get access to that, you can head across there, and we'll send you straight to that page. John, thank you so much for your time. It's been a fantastic conversation. I've absolutely loved this. It's just great having somebody on the show who's, I suppose, been started somewhere, taken it to the next level, but being able to communicate, some of the important areas along that journey so that the listeners and viewers out there can relate to it. Because sometimes you hear, these success stories, and it just makes it so hard to even comprehend how you can get from A to B so quickly. But I think you've done a pretty good job of breaking that down in this conversation. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. So for the guys out there, if you're listening to this and you want to watch it again, you can jump onto YouTube, follow the channel there. It's all live recording. Also, we syndicate this to the Facebook page and into the Facebook group, so you can go and check it out there as well. John, if there's any questions that pop up, which I dare say there may well be in relation to our conversation, can I be so bold as to ask maybe get you back on the show to answer some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, fantastic. So guys, if you have any questions, by all means, you can post them wherever you see this come through, either in our newsletter or on social media, and I will ask John to come back and answer those questions for you. John, thank you very much for your time. I will let you go now. I believe it's getting late in the day there for you, so you probably have important things to do.
Thank you. Take care, Matt.
All right, listeners, that's a wrap. Ciao. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to the siteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from this show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.